Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you. What's up? Can you give me a call back?
Yo, what's up? When are you back again? We've been missing you for a few weeks now. Hit me up soon, okay?
Dude, I miss you. I wish you could chat more. Whenever you're in town, can we just go for a coffee?
I've seen you drop your performance, you're showing up late, you're missing shifts. Has there been a sudden change?
So you're ghosting me
This
now?
isn't like you.
We've had a
Please call
solid
me back.
relationship, and
Now
now I
is
feel like
assignment
you're
coming
dropping
up
off
next
the
week,
face
and we
of the
haven't
earth.
even
I
chatted
never
about
Are
it.
you kidding
Where
me?
are you? We get
I
to
left
get
you with
I'm
this
trying to reach you for
responsibility, and it's not getting
You've
done.
been giving me a call
Gotta
back
keep me in the
soon.
loop because I can't
Can you
keep
give
letting
me
you
a
drop
call
balls
back?
here.
Well, happy Father's Day. As you can probably see, we're participating in our game tonight, if you want to call it that, of kind of like dressing like a dad. And I know some of you did, some of you didn't, which makes me look ridiculous now, but that's okay. After the service, we have the photo booth, the dad-themed photo booth with the greatest dads in film history, including Dr. Phil and Shrek, which you can get your photo with. And so I encourage you to do that. I was thinking about this, though, as we did these dad jokes, as we were talking kind of about what does it look like to dress like a dad, right? Like, what does that actually mean? I came to terms with the reality that it really just means, it's really derogatory, actually. It's not very nice. Like, you gotta dress like you've given up on life, and you need to tell jokes that aren't funny and make people question your intelligence. It's like, this is kind of mean in general, but I'm thinking, like, I'm turning 33 soon, and I don't have kids yet, but as I'm getting older, there's this natural kind of just osmosis that happens to you as an older guy where you're like, dad-isms become a part of your life, whether you've had kids or not. Like, I'm dressed like this now. I had most of this clothing already. Now, I haven't put it together like this before, and I probably won't anytime soon, but put it on today, and I was like, there's something freeing about just everyone. I don't have to worry what anyone thinks because I know they all think it's not good. There's freedom in that. And there's elements of this that just make sense, like cargo pants. There's so many opportunities and unlimited possibilities of what I could put in these pockets. Like, at any moment, I'm the most prepared I've ever been, and like any dad, any good dad has a multi-tool. So if anything goes wrong in this message, we're ready to go. And I'm dadded out, I'm ready to go. It's going to be a good time. I do think that as I've gotten older, I've recognized that there are just those natural things that are becoming a part of me. Like, as I'm getting older, I've started to like black licorice, which, 10 years ago I thought was disgusting. I like black coffee. I like to smoke meat and barbecue. It's just this thing that became a part of me as I approached my 30s. Like, something in my instincts just kicked in one day, and I sat up out of bed. I was like, I gotta smoke some meat. Just this primal urge in me to smoke meats. And that's become a part of my life. And I maybe if I have kids now, like eventually I'm just gonna go up in a whirlwind and come down looking like this, or wearing a fisherman's hat or something like that. But we wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. So whether you're here today and you dressed up like a dad, or whether you are here and you are a dad, or you were dressing up kind of as a father figure in your life, or you are a father figure to somebody, we want to say happy Father's Day to all the dads. So if you're at home, you're watching with your family, you're a dad, grab yourself a cup of Folgers or Nabob, put a lock on the thermostat so no one can change it. Strap in, because this is going to be a great Father's Day message that has nothing to do with Father's Day. So on that level, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had a good time with your family. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever made a massive mistake? Like, I'm not just talking a little bit of a mistake. Like, I'm talking about like a next level mistake. A mistake that is so egregious that the moment it happened, your brain automatically starts to think, what happened? How did this happen? There's no way. This wasn't my fault. And you start looking for somebody else to blame. Have you ever seen someone do that before? Sorry, Smitty. And I remember when that happened, I was sitting there in my house by myself. And as he took the slap shot, I said out loud, I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if that went in? And it wasn't funny when it went in. I was like, what is going on? No! Like, just start throwing stuff. I took off my jersey and just like, I was so upset, and I put the jersey back on. But I think that there's something within his response in that video, and I've been there before, right? Like, where something happens, and you're like, you start to just automatically, you cannot fathom the mistake you just made. You cannot believe, it's like, there's no way that was me. Like, either I went into like, just complete robot mode and I blacked out, or like it's someone else's fault, someone else did it. We're starting to look for someone to blame because it's such an egregious mistake that you're like, I can't even comprehend that I would do something so foolish, so stupid. And you can see that Mike Smith had that there. We're like, no one knew how that went in. And his first reaction was like looking around, you're constantly looking for someone to blame. I remember one time when I was driving on the snow, which we tend to do in Edmonton, and I hit a snowbank. And not anything catastrophic, my car was fine. But I start to look around and think, who can I blame this on? Well, it was my fault. There was no, well, some cat came out of nowhere and I just, I had to save its life, so I swerved into the snowbank. No, that's not the case. It was my fault. But I know that I definitely immediately wanted to make that decision to blame someone else. And there's maybe one time in my life, beyond all others, where I can give an example on this, and it is car related as well. I had some real beaters, let me tell you. My car was pretty old, and I got a call from someone at the church I used to work at in Beaumont. And he calls me and he says, hey, Jeff, I have a 1997 Lincoln Continental. Would you guys like it for a car smash? It's got like 400,000 kilometers on it. And I was like, listen, it's way too much work. We have to drain it. It's dangerous, but thanks for, just too much work. It's not worth the time. And so I said, next time maybe. And the next day, the car I was driving that time actually died. So I called him back. I said, hey, you still got that Continental? He was like, yeah, you want it for a car smash? I'm like, no, I want to drive it. So I drove that thing for 2 years. That thing was a tank. It was really garbage. It was a bad car, but it just kept going, and I loved it. But eventually it got to the point where it was overheating, and the lights wouldn't turn off or they wouldn't turn on, and it was just not safe. So I went and talked to my friend who had a wholesale license, so he could go to auctions and get these cars that had been, and I didn't have a ton of money. I was really trying to pinch pennies, especially at that time. And I said, hey, can you get me a deal? So he found me this SUV, a Subaru Forester. I want to talk about a dad car. A Subaru Forester with a moonroof, like a full-size sunroof all the way to the back, a four-wheel drive, had a couple of hail damage dents on the top, but really nothing too big. Got it for probably half of what it would have been worth on the open market. I was pumped. Like, this is just, it's a good financial decision. What a blessing. What an opportunity. And then I'm driving 2 days later, and I was turning left onto a country road, and I looked right, I looked left. They teach you to do that when you cross the street or if you're about to cross traffic. Right, left, looks clear. We're good. Just got one car that's got to pass. Right, left, and then the car passed, and I start going left. And out of nowhere, I didn't get hit. I hit the oncoming car. Like, it wasn't even like I got hit. Like, I hit a car coming. And it was bad. Like, the car is swerving, she was okay, we were okay, and I'm just sitting there with the steam coming out of my vehicle. And I'm thinking to myself, how? How did that happen? I looked right, I looked left, I hit a car. How? It's got to be someone else. It's got to be someone. Like, how did this happen? She must have been going 200 kilometers an hour. Like NASCAR F1 speeds, ripping. She must have like a turbo NOS something. I don't know anything about cars. She needs like some sort of rocket boosters on her car because there's no way that it could have happened. And I can tell you, I remember trying to go through every single possible way that it wasn't my fault. 2 days after I had gotten this awesome car, I had totaled it. And that is a bad feeling. But it was a mistake, and I remember for the next couple of days waking up every morning and being like just this horrible realization, that feeling of guilt, of just like feeling bad about this thing that had happened, and this feeling in the pit of your stomach, like you wake up, it's like, did that actually happen? Did I actually do that? What a stupid move. How could I possibly have been so foolish? I think we've all been there on some level at some point in time. So what is it for you? What is the thing that you've done? Maybe it's as small, although financially not small, as a car accident or making a small split-second decision, or maybe it was something in a relationship. Maybe you cheated. Maybe you said something you didn't mean to, or that you wish you wouldn't have in hindsight. Maybe it was just a decision that you made that you immediately, in the moment, you thought it's not that big of a deal. But now you're sitting there and you're like, man, I just can't believe that I did that. There's a great example of something like this in the Bible. I want to take you through a little bit of a story of a guy named Peter, and we can catch up with him in Matthew 16. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" Well, they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." So Peter is going by a different name at this point, and he's talking to Jesus, and Jesus is talking to all these disciples, his 12 closest followers, and he says, "Who do you say the Son of Man is?" Now that's a reference, if you haven't been around church or haven't heard this before, to the Messiah. It was this promised person that was going to come, that God would send to free the Jewish people, to make things right, because they had spent basically all their time under oppression from different governments, different nationalities that would put them into slavery. Historically, it's been a rough go for the Jewish people, long term, and even recently we've seen that as well. And so it's been this thing that there was this promised Messiah, this chosen one of God who was going to come and deal with it, the Son of Man. And they would have been waiting for this person for thousands and thousands of years. Generation after generation says, this person is coming. And Jesus asked, "Who do you say that is?" And they kind of most of them are kind of humming and hawing and, well, it's this guy, maybe Elijah. Some people say this. And then Jesus finally kind of pipes up and says, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter, Simon, stands up and says, "You are the Son of God. You're the Messiah. You are the one that they were talking about." Peter is showing some significant faith here, because this isn't like the first time that there was any sort of evidence. Like, these people had been following Jesus for quite some time, seeing miracles that only God could do. So it really shouldn't be that far-fetched for them to be like, hey, this guy might actually be the Messiah. It's been in front of us this entire time. And he says, "You are the chosen one. You are everything that we've been looking for." And Jesus, he says in response, and he looks at that obviously positively, and he makes this statement to Peter. And he talks to Peter, and he's like, "Peter, listen, appreciate that. That's great. You're right on the nose. And I want you to know that you now are going to just be called Peter," which means rock. And he says, "You are going to be the rock that I'll build my church on." And you're going to play a significant role in the building of the church. Now, there's a couple of things to recognize here. This is the first time in the New Testament, which is the second half of the Bible after Jesus was born. And it's the first time that we have the term church show up. And actually, just for a point, for those that maybe have not been around church for a long time, maybe believe or would have the misconception that church is just the building that we're in right now. Like, we talk about that, and we're not going to play around with word games or worry about that type of vernacular too much. But the reality is, we say go to church, and you go to your church building. But the church, as referenced as Jesus called it, and as we believe it to be, is not this building. The church is the people and the community within it. Yes, we meet at a church, we meet at a building, but church is the community. The project is not this building and this stage and this auditorium and where we are and the lights and whatever else. The church, the project is everyone in here right now. The church goes out into the community. The church goes out and serves Edmonton. Our church is for Edmonton. And that's something that sometimes can get lost, that church is not just here. But this is the first time that there was a reference to this, and he basically says, "Peter, you are going to be a key player in this church, in this thing that I'm going to be building." And another thing to recognize here is that Jesus says, "my church." Now, within these prior statements, he's saying, "Who do you think I am?" And he's getting the response that I am the Messiah, that he is God. And so he's making a statement here by saying it's my church. He's saying to them directly but indirectly, I am God. Like, guys, I am God on earth. Just throwing that out there, it's my church. He doesn't say it's God's church because they are one and the same. So those are some kind of key tidbits there, but I want us to settle in on Peter. Think about what it would be for you. What would it be like if you were Peter? How would you feel? I know how I'd feel. I'd be proud. I'd be overjoyed. I'd be so happy because Jesus, God, the guy, the teacher, the guy I've been following around, the guy who I respect, my mentor, the person that has been investing in me, that I want to be like, that I've basically gave up my whole life, my business, everything to follow, he is giving me affirmation. He's not only just saying, I'm good, I didn't just get the question right, I'm not just getting a star sticker on my report card, I'm getting affirmation that I am going to be a significant player in the future of God's church. That's not tiny. I would be like, that's a lot to carry. That's something that's worth being proud of. Now think about like your proudest moment. Like maybe it was graduating high school. Maybe you graduated a course in college. Maybe you're graduating or whatever. You got a job or a promotion. Whatever it is, you felt like you were affirmed. You felt like you finally belonged. You felt like there was purpose in your life, and you felt like everything was going your way. Peter would have been like that, but amplified. That feeling on steroids, because he is just feeling like, I'm important. And everyone likes to feel important. He had a calling, and so much so that Jesus gave him a full-time new name. He goes from Simon to Peter. And his whole identity is in this thing. You are the rock that I will build my church on. I don't know about you, but I'd be walking around with my chest out a bit, with my head held high. Be careful, because I think I might even be able to feel a little egotistical, have a little bit too much pride from that. It'd be really, really, really inflating for your ego to feel what type of words those are. Those are huge statements. The rock that God will build his church on. You are going to have a significant leadership role in this organization, in this community that is going to go out and change the world and continue the work that I'm doing, that Jesus is doing. Think about how much that would matter and how much you would find your identity in that calling. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And the reality is that Peter had earned it, right? He had done well, and he thought that he was on cloud nine at this point. But it doesn't end there. It's not like the next day they, dug a hole in the ground, built a church, and he built it, and he helped lead it, and things were just smooth sailing from there, because actually what ended up happening after that was a short time later, Jesus is with all of his disciples. And he's talking to them, and they're eating food, and he's like, okay, listen, got to tell you something. I have to leave soon. And eventually here, I'm going to be killed. I'm going to die. He predicts his death. And he says, actually, you're all going to abandon me in the future here. And Peter pipes up, and he's like, not a chance. No, not a chance, Jesus. Listen, I'm the rock, right? I'm the rock. I remember that part. I'm Peter. I'm the rock. So, I would never leave you. I would never leave you ever. I would rather die. I would die by your side before that. You don't know that, Jesus, you don't get me. You clearly don't get it. I am so stable. I am all in, and I ain't running away. Well, then, shortly after that, Jesus is arrested. And this is where the Easter story begins, the crucifixion, because Jesus was going around and causing problems for religious people at the time, for people that were bending the rules of God and the Word of God for these very legalistic and manipulative reasons. These Pharisees were using God's Word to try and amplify their own position within society and suppress people that were actually trying to connect with God and were lying about what this Jesus-based life or connection to God would look like. And it was just a really bad situation. So when Jesus comes out and he starts straightening out the lies and showing what the truth is and the relationship with God, and that it doesn't all have to be this legalistic rules and regulations, but God had come to be with them on earth, and that this is something that's very attainable and personal and matters and is actually changes the way that you treat people, and it's not all about the rules. It's about just loving God and loving people and sharing that with the world around you. And that caused problems for people in power that wanted control. So they plotted to have him murdered, and they did. So they went to the Roman Empire, the Roman police, who at that time were occupying that area, and they would have been the ultimate police state authority at that time, and they convinced them that they needed to put Jesus to death. And so they went and they did that, and they found out from one of the other disciples named Judas. You may have heard of him before. It's not a real popular name because of this. You don't meet a lot of Judases these days. And Judas goes and actually trades in Jesus, tells the Roman police where he was for some silver coins, just for a little bit of money. And he turns him in, turns his back on him, and then Jesus is obviously arrested at that point. And you would think, based on Peter's, his account, that if Peter saw Jesus getting arrested by these Roman guards, that, he would just stay by his side and be like, no, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to die with Jesus here. Put me on the cross next to him, and that's how I'm going to go down a martyr, and I'm going to be known for all eternity because of this. I'll be written about because I'm the rock, baby. I'm the rock. That's not what happens. Peter ends up, like all the other disciples, running away. He takes off, scared. All of a sudden, death faces him. Literally, it's right in front of him. At least imprisonment, a horrible death, horrible treatment. Jesus wasn't just murdered. Jesus was beaten. He was whipped. He was tortured. And Peter follows along at a distance, not interceding, not jumping in, not saying no, not participating in any sort of way, but he's kind of at a distance. You want to see what's happening, but you also how horrified he must have been as he's in the act of kind of just, ignoring, not fully, but just kind of not doing anything about it, watching it, but not fixing it. And probably felt somewhat hopeless, because what can you really do? You're going to be able to take down the Roman army in this situation? It's certain death. But here is Jesus. Here's the person that has given you everything, the person you trust more than anything and anyone in the world. And he's being murdered in front of you and tortured unjustly for doing nothing but helping people, for feeding the poor, for healing the sick, for doing good things, for bringing justice where justice didn't exist. And your best friend, your mentor, the father figure in your life is there being tortured. And we catch up with Peter in Matthew 26 again. It says, meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came over and said to him, you were one of those with Jesus the Galatian. But Peter denied it in front of everyone. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. Again, Peter denied it, this time with an oath. I don't even know the man, he said. A little later, some of the other bystanders came over to Peter and said, you must be one of them. We can tell by your Galatian accent. Peter swore, a curse on me if I'm lying. I don't know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. Suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times that you even know me. And he went away weeping bitterly. Jesus had predicted it. He said, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me. And here Peter goes 3 different times. He denies it from 3 different situations. He has 3 opportunities to say, yeah, I do. And he's God. He's my God. He's changed my life. He is everything. And he says he is and more. And he's faced with this fear in the moment that he's going to be discovered, that he's going to have to be put to death, that he's going to be tortured. And here he's having this moment of fear and panic that is controlling his decision-making, that has trumped the statements he made before. I want you to think about how you would feel as that rooster crows. The rooster crows and you realize, you remember those words that you said to Jesus, I would never leave you. I would never deny you. I would never leave your side. I'd rather die than deny that I know you. And here in this moment, he realizes that that's exactly what he did. And suddenly I would imagine for me that if I did that if I'm Peter, I'm thinking, you know what, like all these promises, I'm the rock, I was supposed to build the church. He has all these things that Jesus put into my life, the calling he called me to, the thing that I was defined by, my identity, my literal name is in this. And here I've thrown it all away. It's all gone. It's all done. Game over. It doesn't matter anymore because I've wrecked this thing. I had the opportunity. I had the calling. And now my life is literally ruined. There's no coming back from this. Like, how do not only is he dying, but I denied he even said it after he told me I would, and I argued with him. Think about how you would feel. Panic, fear, dread, anxiety, guilt. I don't know how you get back from that. I don't know how you come back from that decision, from that moment. And in this time, we see in that verse that it says he went away weeping bitterly, like ugly crying, like unconsolable, because he knew it was all falling apart. His whole world, his whole identity, his calling, everything was broken because of a decision he made, because of a mistake that he made, because of the decision that he made in a moment that seemingly had ruined his life. And so Peter is faced with a decision from there because Jesus is crucified, he dies, and we know the good news is he rose 3 days later, defeated death because he's God. But for those 3 days, the disciples had to sit and stew in this feeling that their best friend, that God, that the person they had followed, Jesus, had died and was done, and everything they had committed their lives to was over. And not only that, they had turned their back, they had stabbed their friend in the back. They are all faced with a couple of decisions here, and they all faced them very differently. Some of them went off and just kind of toiled and felt horrible about themselves and just kind of felt depressed. Judas, the one who had turned in Jesus for a little bit of money, he actually ended his own life. And there's two different responses I want to look at. He couldn't deal with the guilt, and unfortunately, he took his own life. Peter didn't. But I can only imagine that it crossed his mind. At that point, every awful thought would have gone through Peter. Every potential negative emotion would have gone through Peter. But he stuck it out for a couple of days. I'm sure they were horrible days. But when Jesus rises from the dead, when Jesus comes back from death, when he defeats death, when the tomb that he was placed in opens up, and 3 days later he rises up and he proves that he is God who can control the universe and can control the most final finality, the most final thing in life, death. He shows himself to his disciples again. And Peter has a moment with Jesus where he sees him again and Jesus forgives him. Where Jesus forgives him. Where Jesus says, it's okay, I know you did that. I know that you know that that was a mistake. And he just gives him a hug and he says, it's all right. And Peter goes on to do amazing things. Peter isn't done at this moment. Peter doesn't have that final straw. Peter's life isn't ruined like he thinks it is, because at the end of the day, Jesus comes back. Jesus is God, and Jesus brings hope to where there was absolutely no hope to be found in that situation. I don't think I can imagine or that I've experienced a situation where there was less hope than what Peter would have been dealing with in that moment. When that rooster crowed and he realized that he had done everything wrong. And he had only himself to blame. Imagine today what this would look like. Imagine today what this would look like for Peter. Like, I can just, like, what an egregious thing that would be for you to do. I could just see you go into your Twitter, trending searches. There'd be something like, local man turns back on best friend and has him murdered. Like, that's not a good situation. Or local friend gives off like a horrible life and just destroys his friend and doesn't care and just like gives it all up and gives up his friend to the authorities, turns his back on him and stabs him in the back. These are the news stories, the headlines that would be out there for Peter with that day. And I can only imagine the response on Twitter to that. It would be horrible. Like, you think canceling's bad? They wouldn't be canceled. This is like full out exterminated, like game over, emotional damage. This is a bad situation. And I can only imagine today that we would see this as like some unreturnable situation. It's a mistake that is impossible to come back from. But I want to talk about what this means for us. This means for us three things. There's three things that we can take from this. There's three truths that I want you to understand as you leave this space tonight about this. Number one is this. Peter is a great example of our own lives. Because we can learn from this that Jesus' forgiveness is unlimited. And this is like the number one hardest thing to comprehend when we're talking about Jesus. This is the number one most difficult thing to wrap our heads around, because I don't know about you, but when people hurt me, I don't easily forgive them. And when I do things that are way more egregious, that are way more against what God has called me to, when I make those mistakes that just leave me totally rattled and like make me feel that I'm not good enough, that leave me feeling guilty and broken, I don't feel like I'm worthy of being forgiven. And this is the most fundamental element of a Jesus-based life, is that, and if maybe you've been in church for a long time and you've heard it, but you've never fully accepted it, or you feel like you've kind of gone too far from this, or you're hearing this for the first time, you need to hear this tonight, is that Jesus' forgiveness is unlimited. The thing that keeps you up, the thing that you've defined yourself with, the thing that makes you feel dirty, gross, guilty, broken, it is not enough to keep you from Jesus. Maybe you did something that is totally out of line with maybe not even just Christianity, but just general human morality. Or you feel like you're a completely unethical person. You feel like you're defined by your mistakes. The things you've done in relationships in the past, the things you did, the cheating you did in school, whatever it is for you, insert that thing that makes you feel like you're defined by that is now your identity. Know this, that doesn't define you. Jesus' forgiveness is unlimited. It is limitless, and whatever you're carrying, he can take that weight from you. He wants to take that weight off your shoulders and carry it. And that starts with just accepting that Jesus is God, and that he is the God of your life, and that if you just make that decision to accept him, to let him into your heart, into your soul, and to be the model, the Jesus-based life that we want to live out in everything we do, that forgiveness is available for every single one of us. We don't have to jump through hoops or go through some obstacle course or do some crazy measuring my good deeds, my bad deeds, whatever it is, and making sure that those are balanced out. I don't have to atone for climb some mountain with rocks on my back so that I feel like I've paid my debt. It is as simple as saying, Jesus, forgive me. I want you to be God of my life no matter what I've done, and I want to turn back from my sin. And that is what Christianity is all about. The decision to make Jesus the God of your life. The best decision you can make in your life. Jesus' love, Jesus' forgiveness is unlimited. And that's whatever you're dealing with today. It's not too much. Second is this, is Jesus doesn't cancel the call on your life. Peter in that moment would have felt like, listen, I'm disqualified. I am 100% disqualified from what I was called to, from the promises that were made to me. I don't deserve it. And he probably was like, listen, I'm not even hoping that I'm going to get this chance. Because like in his own mind, he was too far. He would have just kind of thrown it all away. I made that mistake. But Jesus doesn't cancel the call on your life. Because if he called you to something 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, when you were a little kid, whatever it is, maybe as a youth group, but you put a promise in your heart and now you feel like you've gone too far, or maybe you haven't been in a conversation with Jesus, you haven't read the Bible in a long time, if not ever, and you feel like, man, I don't think that I can do that anymore. You felt called to do something overseas, to do something with a nonprofit, to be a pastor, a missionary. I don't know what it is, a vocation, something to go to school for. And you felt like that was what God called you to, but you kind of got mixed up in the wrong stuff. And you find yourself distant now from anywhere close to Jesus. And you think, I have thrown it all away. My identity is in the mistakes I made, not in what God called me to, not the identity that God gave me. But listen, Project Community, the fact is that the same way that Peter's identity stayed true through his mistakes, Jesus didn't cancel him and his calling. He didn't move away from him. He didn't lose what the promises in his life that God had given him were. The same is true for you. If you look in the book of Acts, which happened after, it's a story of the church beginning. It's in the second half of the Bible, the New Testament. Peter is a part of the building of the church that continues on to today in 2022, that we are a part of. He was a huge part of that, even in spite of the mistakes he made. And the same promise is true for you all sitting here tonight, for every person here in this space, every person watching online. You are not defined by those mistakes, and God has not given up on you, and your calling is not forfeited. You can still do what God's called you to. It's going to take you stepping up and accepting that forgiveness and moving into what God has called you to and taking actions forward and moving more towards Jesus and putting in the work. But you are not too far. There are countless examples in the Bible. There are countless examples of people I know in my own life, times in my life where I was too far from God and I thought that I had missed out on my calling to be a pastor, and I found myself just totally confused and lost. But I can tell you from my own personal experience that you are not too far, because I wasn't too far. You're never too far from God's calling. He doesn't move on, and neither should you. He's waiting for you to come back. He's waiting for you to be in line with your calling. And the last one is this. This really just summarizes everything. You're not your failures. The lie that the devil, that the enemy will tell you is this, is that you are too far gone. You are defined by those things you've done. It's not true. Listen. Because I know there's probably someone listening online or somebody in this room who's heard everything I've said at this point, saying, it's not, you don't get it. You don't know what I've done. You don't know where I've been. It's like, I'm too far gone. I am what people have said I am. I'm what people have said about me online. I am too far. I suck. I'm a failure. And I've made all these horrible mistakes. It's not true. And I just hope you can get that today, because there's no words I can speak that are going to just hammer it home enough, but that God would speak to your heart right now and the rest of the night and the rest of your life and let you know that you are so loved, you are so important, that you are defined by Jesus and not by anything that exists outside of that, nothing that you've been chasing, nothing that you've done, no action you've taken. You are not your failures. Your identity is in who Jesus says you are, not in who the world around you or your friends or your enemies, whatever it is, what they say you are. You are defined by Jesus in your life, not by anything else. And I feel like there are people who need to hear that. You are enough. Doesn't mean we don't work. Doesn't mean that you're not going to fall down. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have to get back up again. But you can do it. So tonight, the band's going to play, and I want you to just do exactly what we talked about. If you're feeling like you are defined by your mistakes, like you've missed out on your calling, like you're too far from God, just listen. Because he's standing there, maybe for the first time ever in your life. You've never accepted Jesus before, and God is there standing, and he's saying, come to me, I want this relationship with you. Or you've been far from church for a long time. You don't even feel God. You don't even know if this Jesus thing was real or if you made it up as a kid. These emotions, these moments. Jesus is standing there and saying, come back. It's real. It's authentic. Maybe you saw something, you experienced something that wasn't in the past, and it wasn't a good example. Some bad actors hurt your perspective of what a Jesus-based life looks like. The Jesus who is God, who created the universe, who built the church, who used Peter in spite of his mistakes, is standing there calling you back and saying, come to me. Come to me. I don't care where you've been. Come to me. You are not your failures. Come and be with me. Be with God. I will give you rest. I will give you purpose. I have called you before, and I'm calling you now. Don't give up, because I will never give up on you. So you can stand with me if you're able now, and the band's going to play a couple of songs. And just let God speak to your heart. You can look at the words. You can sing, you can sit if you need to, but just let God speak to you, because I believe he's going to speak to our hearts.